Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, we've seen fighting Joe Biden. President Biden is dealing with a Republican-controlled Congress for the first, or at least the House for the first time during his term. What are some of the things that they're going to end up really contending with each other on?
I think as we look at this House Republican, this new House controlled by Republicans, the two things that we need to look at are policy fights that he's going to have and political fights that he's going to have. With the country reaching the debt ceiling this month, I think their number one concern is being able to raise the debt limit. How that happens sort of still remains to be seen. The White House was very adamant that they wouldn't negotiate, but we've seen a softening of that opening bargaining stance, if you will, in the past couple of weeks, where they've intimated that they'll sit down with new House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, etc. On the political side, I think we're going to see a lot of investigations now that the Republicans have the gavel, particularly from sort of Representative James Comer from Kentucky, and as in his position as sort of House Oversight Committee chair. The number one sort of cab off the rank in that regard is with with President Biden's handling of classified documents. Not only how he handled them, but I guess also the way that the White House handled the fallout of the controversy. I think that's something that we're going to be seeing. So it'll be interesting. It's sort of the first time that they've had congressional oversight in a politicized environment as the GOP look forward to the 2024 elections.
And some of it's obviously going to be a replay of when President Biden was vice president and they were having debt ceiling fights with Republican House majority. And they still controlled the Senate, and there was all this talk about default, and there was a downgrade of the credit rating and all those sorts of things.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to sort of see is, Democrats sort of going into these negotiations thinking that they're going to have to be the adults in the room. That's the way that they're describing it, at least. And I think that they sort of, there's this sort of understanding that, that this will be resolved, but I think we're also looking at House Republicans that made Kevin McCarthy his election sort of take 15 ballots. So I think that underlying assumption may not be correct this time, but we'll sort of see as they progress. I think that the president huddled recently with Democratic leaders over strategy, and I think at least we're seeing publicly how they're playing it out is sort of they're taking a hard line about how this should be raised without conditions.
So the economy was a major liability for Democrats during the midterm elections. President Biden doesn't get very good job approval ratings on his management of the economy. Isn't some of the debt ceiling fight going to help Biden sort of try to take that issue back from Republicans?
Exactly. Again, playing into this idea that they're the adults in the room. I think Democrats feel like they have this 6-month sweet spot where, one, they want to get the conversation away from this classified documents sort of controversy and onto something positive. And I think that they feel, at least until the summer, before the Supreme Court potentially rescinds Title 42 and immigration becomes one of the key narratives that we talk about, that they have this idea whether they can shape their message on the economy, and they're sort of being gifted with sort of a raft of good economic news, including sort of recently better than expected gross domestic product, which data which sort of suggests that potentially we aren't going to hit a recession. I mean, there are lots of things that could play into that. We're seeing sort of the tech industry lose a lot of jobs. We're not quite sure about how consumer confidence will play out, but I think that they think that they're on a winning message, and the sooner that they shape that narrative, the better.
So speaking of people who shape narratives, there has been a little bit of turnover now in the Biden White House. Who left and why does it matter?
Well, he hasn't technically left yet, but Ron Klain, it's sort of been reported that he is about to leave as White House Chief of Staff. Again, sort of White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre didn't confirm the news, but she did speak very rosy and positively of their experience.
Sounded a bit like
which
a goodbye.
Sounded like a long goodbye, basically. What we sort of suspect is that he'll leave after the State of the Union in February, and he'll be replaced by, reportedly by Jeff Zients, who was Biden's coronavirus coordinator, and then previously was also working in the Obama administration with the Office of Management and Budget, as well as with the National Economic Council. So he comes from that private side. He started in management consulting and investment banking as a Bain & Co. kind of alum.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how, he's got this reputation as being a master implementer.
Right.
So it'll be funny to sort of see how, it'll be interesting, I should say, to see how it plays out, just because Ron Klain was sort of very online, very visible, and very political.
Kind of a Twitter reply guy.
A little bit, yeah, exactly. And so he was very involved in like the political fights, whereas we're not quite sure where Jeff Zients will be. And so it'll be interesting to see how those, if you're interested in like palace intrigue like I am, just to see how those power circles change.
And obviously, this is all happening against the backdrop of whether Biden decides to run for re-election or not.
Exactly. I think, there's sort of an understanding that it's something that is inevitable at this stage. We're sort of seeing his campaign rhetoric sort of be recycled in a lot of his most recent speeches, and we're seeing him actually making a rare appearance with the vice president, taking a little field trip to Pennsylvania, which is obviously a battleground state, to talk again about the economy. And so, yes, as this all unfolds, it'll be sort of interesting to see how the White House plays it versus the campaign side of things.
And he's already said on the economy he's going to veto everything.
Exactly.
Had an uncle veto. Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.